Welcome back to Talk Media for the rest of us. It's the Thom Hartmann program, and Jeremy Scahill is with us for our Conversations with Great Minds this week. His book, Dirty Wars, The World is a Battlefield. And Jeremy, you were one of the people who revealed the fact that Eric Prince was about to boogie out of town. He was the guy who started Blackwater. I mean, you wrote the book Blackwater, and that he was leaving town. And somebody, a rather surprising source, somebody whose name everybody will recognize, shared some of that information with you. Tell us this story.
Yeah, I didn't actually recognize the name of this source at all until well after the fact. And what happened was that I, like yourself, I mean, we get as journalists, we get emails from people all the time, and some of it is just nutty stuff, and some of it's interesting, and some of it you just don't have time to pursue. But I got this email from a guy. It was a very well-written email and thoughtful, who said that he had a personal connection to someone that had information about the movements of the Prince family, of Eric Prince and his family. Which is based out of Michigan. They're related to the DeVos family.
Yeah,
so the Prince family is Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater. His sister is Betsy DeVos, who, of course, married into the Amway family, the Amway Corporation family.
And basically he kind of runs or funds the right wing in Michigan.
More than that,
Party.
they bankrolled the groups that would rise to become the radical religious right, Focus on the Family, the Prayer Warrior Network, James Dobson, Gary Bauer. When Eric Prince's dad died, all of those people came to give eulogies at his funeral. I mean, these were the premier bankrollers of what became known as the radical religious right, and they're very, very much in control of a lot of the right-wing politics and politicians in the state of Michigan.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you and I have talked about this a lot. In fact, one of my favorite quotes from Blackwater about me came from your show, which is you had the vice president of Blackwater on this show, Martin Strong, and you asked him a question about me, and he said, well, Jeremy Scahill doesn't know anything about Blackwater. Right. He said it on your show. In any case, I get this email, and it was someone that was very concerned about the idea that Eric Prince was fleeing the country at a time when his company was facing intense investigations from the Congress, from the ATF, from multiple agencies and entities of the federal government and Capitol Hill, and within Capitol Hill. And so I got in touch with this source that he put me in touch with, and verified that, in fact, Eric Prince was preparing to leave. Got another source on it, then asked Eric Prince's spokesman to comment on it, and he said, I'm not going to comment on Eric Prince's movements. And then I knew it was there. So we published that story. A couple weeks later, the New York Times follows up on it, and Eric Prince had, in fact, relocated to Abu Dhabi. I think a good year or so went by before I knew who this person was. I got a phone call from someone who was doing research on Bradley Manning, who was who of course admitted in his court-martial that he provided WikiLeaks with the hundreds of thousands of diplomatic cables and what's known as the collateral murder video. And he said, I'm reaching out to people who corresponded with Bradley Manning. I said, I didn't correspond with Bradley Manning. And he said, oh, because I've been told that you had. And I said, no, you've been told wrong. And eventually he says to me, well, search your email for this email address. And I search it, and sure enough, I had been tipped off to Eric Prince leaving the country by Bradley Manning.
That's
and
remarkable.
he didn't. And what's interesting is no one knew who he was at the time, so I had no reason to remember the name.
Right.
And it was not at all based on classified intelligence. It had nothing to do with his role as an Army intelligence specialist. It was a random personal connection. And I've recently reread that email, and the tone of it. It's not that short, and it's not too long, but it's not that short. It seems like someone who was truly concerned about the idea that someone whose company was involved with all of this death and destruction was potentially trying to leave so that the federal investigators couldn't question him or wouldn't be able to hold that company accountable. And
to what extent has Eric Prince done that? Has he gotten out of the country and gotten out of trouble?
Well, he appears to be completely out of trouble. I think that's very unjust, particularly to the not only the Iraqi victims of Blackwater, but to the taxpayers. These guys made tens of millions of dollars off their domestic operations in New Orleans after Katrina. Right. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars off of Iraq and Afghanistan. Eric Prince was just in New York, I understand, a few days ago, attending the Tribeca Film Festival, because there's a movie that's been made about his vision for a counter-piracy force in Somalia. So, he lives pretty much under the protection of the lovely democratic royals of the United Arab Emirates, and lives in a place where a lot of the war contracting business operates now in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah. And
no charges against him, but the 5 people under him were indicted on federal conspiracy charges and weapons charges, and they were given 4 months of house arrest.
Remarkable.
Bradley Manning is in John Kiriakou is in prison, the former CIA operative who talked about torture. Thomas Drake, former NSA analyst, is now working at an Apple store because they ruined him for blowing the whistle on warrantless wiretapping. And Eric Prince is having movies made about him and attending the Tribeca Film Festival. I mean, it really says a lot about the state of justice in this war counterterrorism world.
Yeah, it really does. Back to Dirty Wars, The World is a Battlefield.
And Prince is in this book too, Eric Prince, about his actions in Somalia, but we can save that for another time. But
very interesting. Yeah, we just have a minute here to the break. And what is the legal basis that President Obama uses to drop a drone on somebody?
That's actually, that cuts to the heart of what question a lot of Americans should be asking. Right now, if a reporter asks the White House, they'll send you a boilerplate memo about how the original authorization for the use of military force that was passed by the Congress in 2001 during a climate of fear
after 9/11,
that gave after 9/11, and set this sort of standard that anyone that's even remotely attached to the 9/11 attacks can become a legitimate target for the use of military force. Right now, some of the people being targeted under that authorization were toddlers when 9/11 happened. So, if you can look at that and say, well, I guess that there's sort of a rationale there. Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is attached to Al Qaeda and therefore is attached to 9/11. But really, at the end of the day, even if the AUMF was repealed, President Obama, what they really do is they assert the right under Article 2 of the Constitution to conduct the foreign policy and military operations as commander-in-chief. And that's what Cheney and Bush relied on also when pressed on the AUMF.
Wow.
It's an Article 2 justification.
This is exactly what James Madison warned us against in his famous speech about the danger of the executive branch and a state of perpetual war. He said, democracy cannot exist in a state of perpetual war. It's amazing. Jeremy Scahill.